got to the second name of God for this session. The name is El Roi. El Roi. The name means God who sees me. And that was the name revealed to Hagar in the book of Genesis chapter 16. So let's now dive into the story of Hagar and Abraham in the book of Genesis. El Roi, El, the first word means God in singular, and Roi means the God who sees me, the God who watches over me. And that was the name revealed for the first time to Hagar, who was an Egyptian girl, as she encounters the angel of the Lord, Malach Adonai. I believe that the angel of the Lord in the Hebrew Bible is a reference to the pre-incarnate Lord Jesus Christ. Before he came into the world, he revealed himself as the messenger of the Father. The angel of the Lord does not mean that he had an angelic essence. No, he's always God. He's divine. He has no angelic essence. But as the messenger from heaven, because the word malach means messenger, the word can refer to both humans and angels. And in this case, it refers to God appearing to specific individuals in the history of ancient Israel. So the angel of the Lord, I believe, is the pre-incarnate Son of God before he was born to Mary and Joseph. And you will find many biblical scholars who would agree on this perspective. So let's see what happens in this story. So we see that the angel of the Lord sees, and then he finds Hagar. That is Genesis 16. What happens next? That he reveals to Hagar the name of the Lord, and then he gives her some instructions how she's supposed to name her son Ishmael. So let's read these couple of verses here in Genesis 16. But Abram said unto Sarai, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her that which is good in thine eyes. And Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her face. And the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will greatly multiply thy seed, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and thou shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. It's very clear that in Genesis chapter 16, God reveals himself to Hagar as Malach Adonai, as the angel of the Lord. It happens in the wilderness. It happens in a moment of real crisis for her. She lost her faith. She lost her hope. Then God appears and rescues her. Interestingly, we see that the blessing in verse 10 is very similar to the blessing that God told to Abram, and later to Isaac and to the Jacob, right? The very similar statement that is made here. I will greatly multiply thy seed, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And the same Malach Adonai, angel of the Lord, proclaims that she will conceive and bear a son, and his name will be Ishmael. And the name Ishmael is a Hebrew name. It has two parts. Ishma means to hear, and El means God. God have heard thy affliction. God heard your cry, and he's here to redeem you and your future son, Ishmael. According to Genesis chapter 16, the God of Hagar is the one who sees and controls the future. He is El Roi, the God who sees. He controls the unseen world and the unknown circumstances. He reveals the hidden and the unseen. Interestingly, we see that the angel of the Lord reveals himself as her God. Hagar sees the Lord and knows that God sees and watches over her. Let's see what is written in verses 13 and 14. And she, Hagar, called the name of the Lord that spoke unto her. Thou art the God of seeing. Hebrew, Ata El Roi. Ki Amra, for she said, have I even here seen him that seeth me? And that is the divine name that we discuss in this lecture, the name of God, El Roi, the one God who sees us, controls everything in our life, and will never forsake us. Wherefore, the well was called Be'er Lachai Roi. Behold, it's between Kadesh and Bered. According to verse 14, Hagar names this well as Be'er. Be'er means the word for a well, Lachai Roi. Okay? It means that it's the place when God revealed himself to her and give her life. That's the word chai. Means that the word that means life. Chaim is life, okay? So the Lord is the God of life, and he delivers us from our dangerous moments in our lives. And let me share with you a very interesting comment that I read about the interplay between Hagar and God in Genesis 16. And let me quote from Stephen Cole in his article, The God Who Sees. First, God sees Hagar. And second, Hagar sees God. God saw Hagar's affliction. As a result, Hagar saw God's mercy and submitted to him. Applying it to us, we can put it, because God sees our affliction, we can see his mercy and submit to him. The story is indeed very encouraging if you are suffering and feel that God has abandoned you. He has not forgotten you. He sees your affliction just as he saw Hagar's affliction. Because he sees you, you can see his mercy and submit to him. I think it's a marvelous story that is given to us in the book of Genesis for our spiritual edification. And it's the right way of reading the biblical episodes, because we see that whatever we have recorded and preserved in the pages of the Bible is not just ancient history. Those are life lessons to teach us, to edify us, to inspire us, sometimes to challenge us, to correct us. And that is a great principle of biblical interpretation that we find in Paul's letter to the Romans. If you turn to Romans chapter 15, in the New Testament, Romans chapter 15, verse 4. What do we see here? Romans chapter 15, verse 4. For whatever was written in former days was written for our instruction, for the instruction of the believers. That's why the Old Testament is so relevant to us today. That through endurance and through the encouragement of the scriptures, we might have hope. So the story of Hagar, the story of Jacob, both which we study today, are stories of real hope and trust in the God of the Bible. And that should inspire us, fill us with joy, fill us with hope and love even more.